All right, back again, guys, for our last section of notes for Unit 12 and for the school year. Hopefully you got any questions or misunderstandings clarified before moving on to this, because this is going to basically be the same thing. Now we're going to be multiplying the radicals. But what's going to happen is as soon as we multiply them, we're just going to go ahead and break them up and simplify them. So I call it make up to break up. It's a song from years ago, maybe your parents know. All right, so this is what we're going to do. So here right on the side, we've got the steps and our first example. So the first thing we want to do is multiply together the numbers that are on the outside of both radicals, if there are any. Sometimes there won't be, but for this first one, I did include them. So just following that, multiplying the numbers from the outside, that would give me a 10. Then what we're going to also do is multiply together the numbers on the inside. Oop, inside. So 3 times 6, that gives us 18. Now the numbers that were underneath the radical though, guys, don't forget they still need to stay underneath the radical. So the first thing you're going to do is just simply multiply. Things that are outside the square roots get multiplied and put in front. Whatever's inside the square root of the radical will still stay under the radical. Now we're going to treat this just like a problem from the last section of notes. Let's go ahead and prime factor that 18. I'm going to do that off to the side here. If I prime factor 18, that's going to give me 2 times 9. The 9 will break down into the 3 times 3. So my prime factorization for this is 10. And then underneath here is 2 times 3 times 3. Remember, our goal of simplifying is to look for pairs. So notice that I do have a pair of 3's here. So what that means is that 1 3 will go ahead and come out of the square root. These will end up getting canceled out. From there, we're just going to multiply what was in the front here. So 10 times 3 is 30. And then this 2, because he was not part of a partnership or a pair, just stays underneath. So our final answer is 30 radical 2. Now some of these down here are going to be a little bit more simpler. I just decided let's go big right away or go home. Or you're already at home. So you know what I mean, okay? So let's take a look at number 2 now. So you'll notice with number 2, technically, there are no numbers on the outside. I mean, I guess you could say there's a 1 and a 1, but obviously when you multiply 2 1s, you just get a 1, and when you multiply something by 1, that's nothing. It's just whatever you multiply by. So we're not going to do that first step of multiplying what's on the outside. Instead, the only thing we need to do first is multiply what's on the inside here. 5 times 5 times 15 is going to give us 75. So at this point, guys, this problem is really just saying, go ahead and simplify the square root of 75. Now, it is definitely not an even number, so as I prime factor it here, I notice that it's not going to be divisible by 2, but I do notice I can get 3. It's actually going to be 3 times 25. Bring down that 3 so you don't forget it. And the 25 is just 5 times 5. So this square root of 75, oops, lost our sheet, but it's coming back momentarily. Square root of 75 is just going to give us 3 times 5 times 5. Get my weight here. So I notice that I've got 2 5s there, so we're going to go ahead and pull one of those out, and then of course cross them both out from underneath. There's no number in the front, so 5 will just be the 5. This 3 does not have a partnership or a pair. He's all by himself, so he stays underneath. So your answer is 5 radical 3. So again, the whole point of these problems is if you have numbers in the front, go ahead and multiply them. If you have numbers underneath, multiply them. Just make sure that those ones that were underneath the radical inside stay inside. And then it is just like the last section of notes. So at this point, guys, if you still didn't do the last section or you're still unsure of that, okay, just know that we are going to be continuing on with this. So make sure that you do go back to those other notes to kind of give you a refresher. So I just came up with a couple more problems for us, and then we'll be done. So for number 3 here, we've got -7 square root of 14 times the square root of 8. So technically there is a coefficient there on that 8. It is really just a 1. So when you think about multiplying those outside numbers, it's really just -7 times 1. So that's -7. And then we're going to go ahead and multiply the numbers that are underneath. And I will use a calculator to just double check that math real quick. 14 times 8, that gives me 112. So I have 112 underneath the square root, and I've got a -7 on the outside. So now I've got a prime factor 112. Yowzers. Okay, so I'm just going to do that off to the side. So I've got my 112. I know that it's even, so I'm going to go ahead and divide it by 2. When I divide it by 2, that's going to end up giving me a 56. When I break up the 56, that'll be 2 times 28. And when I break up the 28, that'll give me 2 times 14. And then lastly, let's just keep pulling down these 2s. I don't want to lose any. That 14 will break up into 2 and 7. Now I finally have all the prime factors right there. So what I've got going on with this problem, just so I'm clear, is I've got that -7 out in front. Underneath, I've got that 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 7. Now I'm ready to look for my partners. So I've got 2 2's here, so that's going to pull out a 2 and cross out that guy. I've got 2 2's here, that's going to pull out another 2, cross out those. And now just to rewrite so we're clear, I still have that -7 in the front, and then I pulled out that 2 from the first pair, and then I pulled out the 2 from the second pair, and all of those will end up getting multiplied together. And then of course we have this 7 here who did not have anybody, so he just stays underneath. So we're just going to go ahead and multiply all of these numbers here. That's going to be -7 times 2 times 2, and that will give us -28, and then we'll have radical 7 underneath there still. And that is our final answer. And we're just going to show you guys one more example. This time we've got the square root of 12 times the square root of 12. No numbers out in front, so we're just going to go ahead and just right away multiply what's underneath. 12 times 12 is going to give us 144. You may notice something about that number. I'm going to pretend you don't. All right, 144. All right, divide by 2. We get 2 and 72. Break up the 72. That's 2 and 36. Break up the 36. That's 2 and 18. And then we break up the 18. A lot of numbers going here. There's a 2 and a 9. Woo! Then carrying down all these primes, and then finally breaking up that 9 into 2 3's. So 144 prime factored is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. All right, let's write that all out. Whoop. So 2 2's, another 2 2's, and then 2 3's. I don't know about you guys, but I'm noticing that everybody seems to have a partner. Everybody's part of a pair. I've got these two 2s. I've got these two 2s, and then I've got two 3s. So I'm gonna pull out this 2. I'm gonna pull out this 2. I'm gonna pull out this 3. At this point, nothing is left underneath the square root. So I don't have a square root in my answer. Instead, all I have is 3 times 2 times 2, which are all those numbers we pulled out. And when we do that math, we get 12. Now, maybe some of you guys already kind of saw that that was going to happen. Maybe you remember that we talked about perfect squares in the beginning of the year. You talked about it maybe in foundations or in your 8th grade math class. That 144 was a perfect square. It's 12. It's 12 times 12. But if you didn't remember it, take a look at how everything worked out. All your perfect squares, guys, will always prime factor into perfect pairings. Also notice one thing. It was a 12 and a 12, and our answer was 12. So guys, anytime you multiply two radicals and they have the exact same number underneath, you can literally just cross them all out and just put that number that was underneath that they had in common. Okay, so just to clarify, if I'm gonna do, let's say, square root of 4 times square root of 4, that's gonna always give me 4. Square root of 6 times square root of 6, that's always gonna give me 6. Square root of 11 times square root of 11, that's always gonna give me 11. Square root of 252 times the square root of 252, that will give me 252. No need to multiply and break it all down. It will always end up giving you that same number, okay? And that's just for the fact of you're multiplying two of the same factors. They're already a pair in itself, okay? So we just thought we'd throw that in there because that might be something that's going to be useful for you when you do radicals in the future or radicals in geometry. So it's important to understand just some of these basics in order to help you get a good basis, okay? So that finishes our notes number 2. Remember to go on to Google Classroom and do your homework number 2. And please, please, please make sure you ask us any questions you have before you move on to take the final quiz. Don't tell us afterwards or we can't help you at that point, okay? So I hope this helped. Let us know if you have any questions. Have a wonderful summer. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we hope to see everybody in the fall. See you later.